Okay, sweet. Dan
Okay.
Chaon.
Hello.
Hello. Hi. Welcome back, everyone. I'm going to put the chapstick down. Welcome back to the God, whatever Podstack this is at this point. It must be Podstack 5. We've progressed as a species. I'm sure you and we've also made progress in our lives since I first started this Podstack, which was over a year ago. And there's just been cool things happening. And I know for a fact, Dan, there have been so many cool things happening in your life, which we'll get to soon. But folks, I'm sure if you're subscribed to this Substack, Podstack, whatever you want to call it, then you know who Dan Chaon is. He is the very generous blurber of my second book. I only have three, so I'm not sure why that was like hard to remember.
Because you
But
have so many blurbs.
so many thank you. Good save, Dan. Um, yeah, Dan's super awesome, and just it's such a joy to have you here, Dan. You're just a writer I greatly admire, and I'm so excited to talk to you today about your work, kind of broadly writ, but also these three books in particular. I have a
Okay.
nice little stack here. We could arrange them in order, right? So yeah. So this was in terms of most recent. Await your reply was what year was your reply?
2009.
Whoa, dang. And then was
Yep.
this 2018?
2017, the
2017.
paperback was 18. Yeah.
Okay. Oh, okay. That's a nice paperback. Let's look at the paperback of Ill Will, everybody. Such a good book. And then this was 22, right?
Yep.
Dang. Dan, Sean, thank you for coming on the
My
Cosmic Show.
pleasure.
Pleasure to have
Pleasure.
you. So I want to talk about these three books because I absolutely adore them, but obviously I'll be asking you questions that could apply to any of your my God, Dan, how many books is it now?
It's 8.
8.
Yes.
Goodness. It's such a you are a prolific writer, and that is an exciting thing.
Oh, I always feel like I'm not. That's interesting.
I feel like you are.
Yeah. Okay. I'll
Well,
take it.
it's because it's just because we could talk about this more too because I mean like you are a writer of like dense and highly involved and seriously gripping novels and like novels that are I think like oh, man I think you give a lot of yourself to each novel.
Mhm.
um and I think being a boundaried writer, right, and not like giving everything over. That's what I attempted to do in my first book, and it went a bit sideways. But being a boundary writer and not giving everything over can be difficult. And I think that you share yourself with us very generously, and you do so within this sort of like subgenre of like the literary realist crime thriller.
Right.
So cool. So let me start with our little thing here. Dan, I'm referring to you. Well, I'll refer to you as Dan Chaon throughout this interview, and just Dan. But it should be known that I think of you as the poet laureate of shattered Midwestern masculinity,
Okay.
and or the Virgil to our collective Dante on a just a sort of giant descent into America's duplicity greased late capitalist inferno. That's
Mhm.
you. Those are your titles. Um,
Okay.
um you are someone who I think it like thematically there's so much territory to cover here, but it's also like I think these at least these three books, there's such an elegant concentration of your themes here. It's like so easy to like come up with questions about these books just because like you state yourself so like or you state what you want to say so elegantly throughout the pages of these three books. I want to focus on motifs first because the English professor in me is still
Right.
there, sadly, for better or for worse. And even though I was saying earlier that I look like a Dan Chaon teenager, a teenager in a Dan Chaon novel because I'm unshaven in a flannel, I'm still going to ask a really pedantic teachery question, which is, um, you know, Dan, you've got these really, really cool ideas. Both of these books, you're playing with the notion of the twins, right? The good
Hmm.
twin, and this kind of like Janus face masculinity, where at least here we've got Miles and Hayden Cheshire.
Hmm.
Miles being the normal guy, being and of course Hayden being the more Tyler Durden figure, and then we've got Dustin and Rusty in Ill Will, which is
Right.
a masterwork.
They're
And
not actual twins, but
not exactly. Well,
then
yes,
but there are there are twins in there. It's in the characters of Kate and Wave.
and Kate and Wave. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, and then the actual the girls, Kate and Wave, the cousins, Dustin.
Right.
Yeah. So you're already
Yeah,
at,
there's a lot of twinning and twins and um as you say, Janus face stuff going on.
and I just want to see how. My question is, how are you using this within these really like propulsive sort of like thrilling kind of crime adjacent texts? Like, how are you using the idea of twins or like notional twins, right? They're not literal twins, to like explore themes of, I don't know, good and evil, morality, like
Right.
identity. Yeah.
Right. Um, well, I mean, I think like there's a bunch of different answers, but I mean, I think one is just that as somebody who was adopted, I've always been really interested in like long lost whatever. I'm also a Gemini. And this idea of um finding a long lost twin or having a long lost twin was really like inspired me as a young person. I was always like kind of hopeful. And um there was even like an after school special movie that I remember like very fondly, and I was trying to find it online. I couldn't find it, but I seem to remember it's like The Boy Who Looks Like Me. It's
Oh,
something like that.
oh
Uh,
man.
and it's like whoever it was, Tatum O'Neal or somebody is like a high school student, and then a new boy comes and they look exactly alike. And what is it? Turns
Yeah.
out they're both, like adopted and separated. Um, but there's also like a little bit of creepy, incestuous vibe going on. Um, and which brings me to one of the other reasons that I like to use twins is because I don't like to write and I have a hard time writing um, cis romantic relationships for whatever reason,
Yeah.
or just real romantic relationships in general are like almost non-existent in my work, and it's because it always seems to come out bad for me. I
Oh,
just can't. I just have a really hard time with it.
interesting. So
I
in
mean, so you probably noticed that. I mean, they're pretty sexless books. I mean, there's a lot of like, um,
yeah, it happens off stage, but the sex happens, but yet not on stage. Yeah.
right. I mean, actually, I think Will in Sleepwalk is really sort of classic ace character.
Yeah.
I mean, he has sex for money, but he doesn't seem to enjoy it.
Right. 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 Right.
um, or be interested in it. But so then there's that, and then I just think I mean, it gives you these things that you can do plot wise that uh would be more difficult if they weren't twins. So, like you don't have to really explain why is Miles searching for Hayden. I mean,
Good.
why is he obsessively searching with Hayden? Oh, because it's his brother. So then that, sort of solves a big problem, a big sort of emotional weight problem.
Hmm. Oh,
Um, and similarly, like we get this doubling in ill will um, well, a lot of doubling of Dustin being a sucker and like just falling for whatever like male figure is put in front of him. He's like a duck, you just put a dude in front of him and he's like, yes, I follow. Um, be my older brother.
yeah. Seriously.
um, and so yeah, I mean it allows me to do some fun things with plot. It also allows me to skip some things that I don't want to talk about.
Good.
So there's and then it's a fascination of mine.
It's so, I mean, well, that's such a, this answer really has me thinking. It's such an interesting answer because it's like twins. I see twins in your novel, like, of course, right? Like as a device, like practically speaking,
Right,
it like the idea of a like a set of twins, like people who are twins, does some emotional heavy lifting. Like it's like baked into twinhood, right?
right,
Like there's a
right.
sense of, and this is actually what I wanted to ask you about, a sense of uncanniness, right? Because you're a writer who plays a lot with like memory, lost memory, recovered memories, hypnosis, and kind of in that realm of the sort of, maybe uncanny is the wrong word, but like in that realm of thought broadcasting or psychic connection, or just the way our thinking can be either enhanced or manipulated. Twins fit snugly in that realm, right? Because like
Right, right,
actual twins, that there's there people report having these experiences of like finishing each other's sentences, or like knowing, one twin could be on the west coast and know that the twin on the east coast is hurt. And is that something that has kind of fascinated you and
oh
figures in too, or
yeah, absolutely. I
yeah.
mean, and it's also like I think it gives you this way to talk about the way like closeness to another person shapes you, and how, I mean, I think all of my twin characters, with a few exceptions, are people who have kind of like untrustworthy relationships with that person who they're really close to as well. So there's like there's a sense like, oh, I have this person who's close to me, let me think about how I can manipulate them.
Yeah. Oh man. Yeah, like the kind of like the Svengali in your own home, the,
Right.
yeah, and then you totally, like, we talk about Dustin Tillman as this sort of endlessly malleable younger brother character, where first it was Rusty, right, who
Hmm.
was foster brother, adopted brother, who was not a twin at all, right? But
Right.
he has nevertheless has the sense of this kind of twinning closeness with him, or he's compelled at least by Rusty as a kid. And then you have oh man, I'm trying to think. Oh well, then you have like, and this is not as much a twin experience, right, as this sort of like like a younger man, a younger dude, a boy being compelled by an older like father, or like father figure, or father adjacent figure, older brother
Right.
figure.
Older brother. Yeah.
Yeah, and then and I'm thinking in the case of what you reply of Ryan Schuyler and his actual dad, who he's got that Bobby Darin dad situation,
Right.
where it's like, your dad's your uncle, I'm your mom. Just kidding.
Right.
That's your dad. Your dad had you, like, so spoiler alert, Ryan Schuyler's dad is a very young guy. I won't say who he is, but he's a very young man. And had Ryan when he was 16. And so in Ryan's case too, right, there's, in both Dustin and Ryan's case, there's this it's not actual twinning, right? But it's this psychological suggestibility, this desire to go along with the alpha male.
Right.
It's kind of baked into that whole realm of the thought broadcasting and the coercion and the suggestibility. And I'm like, so like this, and of course
I
ties
mean,
into,
it's also it's a kind of your wheelhouse as well.
oh, certainly, yeah. But I'm so interested in like how you like how like, I don't know. I'm so interested in how it plugs into your specific wheelhouse, like the kind of like younger,
Um, well, I mean, I
terrible
guess
younger guy.
that. I mean, certainly, I mean, had had those types of relationships as a kid because I had a lot of older cousins. I wasn't really close to my younger siblings who were 3 and 6 years younger than me, and I had cousins that were sort of slightly older. And definitely like I was the good kid who was going to college, and nobody in my family went to college, and I liked bad kids. I really liked them.
You're the good kid who like the bad kid.
But I never really did anything wrong. I mean, I smoked a lot of weed when I was a kid, but
Who
I never
among
got
us?
caught.
Who among us has? Yeah.
Never, and made sure I didn't get caught. Whereas, I was hanging out with people who were definitely going to get caught before they were 18.
Well, and that's like, well, and so I'm thinking there's just such an incredible moment where like Ill Will does so many cool, really cool things formally, but there's an incredible one of these panels
Uh-huh.
where Jill is talking to Dustin, Jill, the successful lawyer, right? Is
Hmm.
talking to her husband, who's a psychotherapist who grew up in a kind of a really immiserated working class environment where there's like not a lot of money. And well, when there is money, it comes from his dad's arm being severed in an accident.
Right.
And the way that conversation was so interesting because Jill's talking about like, hey, you got out and this and that, and like now I'm going to take care of you. And she's obviously it's there's so much love coming from Jill in that moment, even if it's kind of like um it's a little bit playful, coquettish. They're kind of joking in some ways, but I think also like, oh, you escaped this horrible place, and now I've got this big lawyer lady to take care of you. But I think in a sense it's a bittersweet moment for Dustin, right? Of like, because he too was the good kid in the hard scrabble environment.
Right.
And he got out, right? But he has complicated feelings, I think, about it. And I think that ties into why he goes back into this with Akil.
Right.
And I'm
Right.
wondering if you could speak to that kind of that trajectory for him, at least.
Well, I think the trajectory for him and the trajectory for me are similar in a certain. I mean, obviously my parents weren't brutally murdered when I was a teenager, like his were. But um, like I grew up in a really, I mean, it was poor and it was like violent and abusive. And um, when I left for good. And like I haven't talked to a lot of those people since I was in my early 20s.
Mhm.
Like there's a point like in when you're in your like 20s when you think you can still fix things. Um, I can still make these people love me for who I am. Wrong, you can't. Um, but there's still a lot of, I mean, I think there's still a lot of guilt and a lot of pull back to that place. I mean, because it was clannish in a way nobody, you weren't supposed to leave,
Mhm.
right? And when you did, it was kind of like you died. You know,
Whoa. Yeah.
you know what I mean? I mean, I mean, you weren't dead, but you became not a part of the like ever ongoing drama, etc. of
Your
like
name does not
extended
pass
family.
their lips. Yeah, I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
Is
Uh,
it, are we talking about similar to Dustin, Nebraska, like working class?
yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think um I write about it in my stories, and in the other novel, You Remind Me of Me, as well, where it's also got uh, that literally is about long lost brothers. Um,
Yeah, I'm definitely gonna read it. I'm gonna read it all, but yeah, that'll be my
but yeah, I mean, so it just, I think emotionally, sort of this stuff about social class, about social mobility, and um, about escaping a certain kind of um family situation, um is like, I think it's a personal story, but it's also very American story, right? I mean, our what's his name, the vice president guy, hillbilly elegy guy, that's like
yeah.
that's his
That
story.
is his story.
That's his, but he has like the most evil version of it.
And isn't it in right? But it's so interesting how Tim Waltz is trying to make it his story as well. I guess I want to talk about like this. Oh man, I'm so interested in talking about the self-made man idea
Right.
versus what actually goes into escaping a state of clannish immiseration and of the rural, because like JD Vance is very much someone who was that set of beliefs was formed in that crucible.
Right.
So interesting to examine. But before we get to that, I because we've got a whole grifting discussion part of this interview.
Right.
I want to
Right.
your market for that. But I'm before we go on, just to kind of like last little bit on the twins thing. I'm wondering, Dan, do you see so if we're talking about, right, like we've gone beyond like genetic, like fraternal twins, identical twins, whatever, and we're talking about this concept of twinning, of yes, thought broadcasting, but maybe even also mirroring or echoing, right? In the same,
Right.
like, yeah, so like Ryan Schuyler echoes Aaron Tillman, um, echoes Dustin Tillman, right? Like there are like conceptual twins in your books, right? Like there are
Right.
I could read these three books and I could point to characters who could be the same man in different stages of his life.
Mm-hmm.
Or could, you know what I mean? Like Ryan Schuyler begins in whatever, 1985, let's say, not in this book, but in, there's a teenager in 1985 who's disaffected, suburban, miserable,
Right. Right.
who grow up to become,
Right.
Will, right? And so like, so it's that's interesting. But then there's also this phenomenon of they even like before they become like the same guy at different stages of his life, they also are echoes and mirrors of each other. They're twins. You have these, like, it's so elegant. It's like, Dan, it's like you skipped a rock into a lake, and it skips, like, every time it skips, it lands in a different book. It's so
Mm-hmm.
fucking cool. And so I'm wondering, like, do you see it that way too, right? Where there are these echoes and mirrors, like call this almost like call and response thing of like await one character and await your reply calls, and then another character in ill will responds, and it's like a kind of twinning.
Right. I mean, I think you're putting it in a very generous light, and I think it's because I have a very narrow range of obsessions that I'm trying to disguise by switching genres in various ways. Um, and one of the meanest things my sister ever said to me was, she was like, when she was reading Ill Will, she's like, I was kind of impressed with the way you wrote Dustin. You're much more insightful about yourself than I thought you were. I was like, I am not. I am not him. And
Oh,
she's like, oh, I
I
know,
love
I
like,
know, hon. I know.
oh, the
It's
immediate
fiction,
assumption of
isn't it?
autofiction. It's always got to be, yeah, no. I actually
You're much more insightful about yourself than I thought you were.
you should have just been like, oh, well, I guess you're like, yeah, yeah, that's me. I shout out to my parents and a couple other family members, I had like a I'm working on really, it is really explicitly autofiction, but I made clear to state that this, the parental characters have these notional resemblances, but are not you guys. They're not
Right.
you.
Right.
And I had that conversation so many. I had it over text. I had it in person. I don't think it's quite sunk in yet because my mom was like, "Well, it's really heroic that you made the doctor, a pediatric doctor of pediatric medicine. I wanted to be the." It's like, "Mom, but she's not you. She's not you. Like,
Right.
you're a hero in your own ways, right? But you're not. You're not her." Like, yeah, it's very silly. But to touch on the narrow range of obsessions comment, that's isn't that anyone?
I
Isn't that
think so. I
a
think
writer?
so.
That's just a writer.
Right. But I'm like, I mean, in terms of, I mean, I guess in terms of like the call and response between books, I kind of like that aspect when you're reading but like reading a bunch of somebody's books and you start to see these things that and I mean I kind of love that. So um I'm not I'm not sad that I have a narrow range of I
No.
mean I do but I do try to like mix it up a little bit.
Yeah. I mean, I guess we could say that like Charlotte Bronte had a narrow range of obsessions, even though she
Right.
like invented the marriage plot, like was one of the greatest writers that, like it's I feel like yeah, I feel like I mean, you of course you mix it up brilliantly, but it's also like so it's the commonalities are it's not just like, oh, here's Dan, he's talking about severed hands again. It's more like, whoa, I'm fascinated. I want to go down a rabbit hole. What's a what's a Wikipedia article that I could click on endlessly where I could like find every one of your, you know what I mean? Like it's like I was saying, it's almost this like poetics of shattered masculinity
Right.
lens of it's like brilliantly realized crime fiction where you're getting everyone's internal worlds so elegantly. And I mean, I'm like, hell yeah, like if you wanted to do that and you just wanted to write about like I don't know, what's something really bleak, like if you're like, okay, I'm just going to have all these guys be obsessed with foot fetishes in ways that undo them and destroy them, I'd be like,
Right.
that I'm sign me up.
Right.
It's bleak and fascinating, and yeah, I love it. So actually, to that end, can we talk about the severed arm severed hand thing?
Sure. I mean, it's just like, um, it's a, it's an image I like, and it's a resonant metaphor, right, for the way that these particular men are going through life with a like a part of them sort of taken off, but there's like a ghost of it still. I mean, I think it's like this thing of that has to do with um the ways in which American men are like hobbled and
Yeah,
um really kind of, it's like one of those things where um um like my dad had this pair of work boots that he wore, and um as he got older his foot kind of took on the shape of the work boot. In that, you know what I mean? And so it's like you're in these you're in this sort of um place where your emotional and intellectual life is very, very narrowed, or
yes,
at least like what you can actually talk about with other human beings.
it's
Um,
yeah. Oof. It's almost like denied. Like it's like
right,
oh, emotional intellectual life. Who cares? Like yeah,
right. Um, yeah, I mean, like, I, well, this is just a small example, but I hate sports. I hate, it's so boring to me. Um, and yet I feel like I have to, like, know at least enough that if I sit next to some man on the bus, I can have a 5 minute conversation with them about the, the Cavaliers or whatever.
Man, because he's gonna because that will be his gesture of like goodwill and like
Right. Right.
fellowship and fraternal fellowship. And you're like, he will look at you, Dan. I mean, I know you know this, but he'll look at you. You look like someone who's gonna know a little bit about sports at least. And I do too right now because I haven't
Right.
shaved. So I look like
Right.
someone, oh, those Astros. I mean, I'm not even near Texas. I just think of the name of a team. But like, and it's such a, this is something I've been like thinking about more and more often, especially vis-a-vis like gender times and like queer theory. And
Right.
yeah, like I think what a lot of critiques of the patriarchy miss, I mean, obviously critique the patriarchy valid, but they miss how unbearably like like devastating it is to occupy a masculine subjecthood.
Right.
It's
Well, I
not
mean, and
like
also like there's like
white men
there
aren't
was this,
having fun. White men aren't like, yeah, like
well, some of them are, I think.
some of them are
Some of them really embrace
fun.
it. Yeah. But like there was a meme that was going around that was like um about like gender microaggressions, and it was like what if a woman said, you were walking by and a woman said, you're pretty, you should smile more. And I was like, I would love
You
that.
could someone could not see, because like seriously though, it's so, because God, yeah, it's like definitely, that's so fascinating because
Because I mean, I think that it's like I get that it's like incredibly demeaning and um annoying for women, but I think it's like sort of the opposite for men. It's like that never, like a small compliment
yeah,
about your physical or your
right,
facial or whatever never happens.
right.
There's
But
a lady at the farmers market that always like says like really complimentary things, and she's also a cheater, but I still go back to her. Because even though she gives me,
farmers
she'll
market
be
lady,
like,
please don't watch this.
right, but I'll be like, can I get 4 mangoes? And she'll like be like, sure, and then she'll give me one that's like rotten, but she'll be like, sure, I love your beautiful eyes, and I'll be like, okay, I'll come back.
Oh, the rotten mango lady. Is
Right.
that going to be a story in the collected works?
I don't know. I don't know.
But that, no, seriously, Dan, like this is such a, okay, so like we're at such a like point of total gender crisis in this country right now.
Oh, I
Like
know.
disaster. And that's why I feel like your writing is so important, among many reasons. But I think like people don't, so yeah, like yes, sure, some white men are having fun, right? But it's not the kind of fun that comes from, say, like joy and and
No,
and
no.
contentment and self-love and self-actualization. Actually just wrote an essay about this, how so many of the conversations that I had, whatever, full beard or deeper voice or whatever, passing as a man, natal man, um it wasn't like, yeah, okay, yes, there was the nihilistic misogyny, the chauvinism, the one-upsmanship that was happening.
Right.
The biggest theme, and I know you know this, but I'm telling this to my viewers as well, the biggest theme that came up was, hey, I'm a failure. I'm a failure and I'm riddled with shame. I'm a loser.
Hmm.
Here's how I failed in my life. Here are the ways, here are the reasons, and I'm a piece of shit. So,
Hmm.
and the more masculine, the heavier that came in. It was so wild because like I was feeling, if I was feeling content or happy, to have escaped the realm of misery that I knew, right? Into a realm
Right.
of misery I did not know, into a new neighborhood where there's a whole different set of brutal expectations
Right.
that I was not familiar with. And I was just like, oh, I'm in a new neighborhood. And then the other dudes were like, this neighborhood sucks. Why are you happy?
Right.
You know what I mean? And so
Right.
I think that's actually what we're you know, we're missing a huge part of the conversation here when we talk about like gender and patriarchy and how men are experiencing patriarchy and how men are damaged by it. It's it's awful. The damage is intense, and it's like, you know, like if I, right, like if someone would say like, "Hey, Dan, you're looking pretty today. I hope you smile," you'd be like, "Oh, that's a
Right.
nice thing." As opposed to, you know, I think that someone, let's say a man who, let's say David Lurie in Jam Coetzee's Disgrace, he's not feeling really happy when he grooms that college student. That's not the
Right.
actions of a self-loving, joyful man, right?
Right. Right.
It's a malignant behavior, but it's not a happy behavior. And so I think that this actually is part of the bigger conversation. The question I had for you about male loneliness and its various manifestations, because your books explore this in just a genius fashion. I People need to read these, because we need to like get rid of these patriarchal expectations or these gendered expectations for everyone, women
Right.
and men. And so yeah, I think this is my next question, I guess, Dan, is like, how, you know, we see with the Dustin's dad losing his arm and Ryan losing his hand, the ways in which men are hobbled or literally instrumentalized, their bodies become part of the machine of capital in
Right.
a specific way. Women's bodies do too, of course.
Right.
They're sexualized in these ways that, you know, and men's bodies become in part of capital in this way. How, what other ways in your books and in your observation do you see this sort of like male loneliness, or this kind of this patriarchy basically working on men in ways that doesn't really get talked about, and should
Well,
we benefit from hearing?
yeah, I mean, I think um the the aspect that I'm most interested in is really tied to social class.
Hmm.
Um and I feel like as somebody who moved social classes, I see like the benefits and the problems of masculinity are like very different in the like two, like when you're in a working class situation, it's masculinity is really rigid, but within that rigidness there you can still write a haiku, right? I mean there's still like a certain like I feel like there are men in that situation that are less lonely and become more comfortable with their masculinity, even though they're completely locked in a box. They can only do like five things,
Right.
but they can. Whereas I think as you move into sort of like upper middle class, there's more freedom with masculinity, but there's more confusion, and there's like as we've talked about in like in private, there's like this other kind of competition, and manipulation and backstabbing, and friendship is harder. Um, I think from as you get into like upper middle class stuff, um, because the kind of aggressive competitive stuff is masked, and there's a lot of gaslighting that goes on between men, right?
So
I
much.
didn't do that. Yeah, you did.
It's what, and this actually is now kind of ties into the criminality element,
Hmm.
right? But like, what's the deal with I called it the like immiseration plan, like the so you know the upper middle class man, right? We're not talking about these working class characters who are like Jay and await your reply, like, you know what, I'm out.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna play by the fucking rules because look what it did to me, and look what
Right.
it,
Right.
I'm life of crime, okay. But what's up with the like that kind of like because you do discuss this in your books as well, right? Your characters are primarily working class or from working class backgrounds, but you do explore that sort of cloak and dagger nonsense of upper middle class American masculinity. And
Right.
I'm like so curious, like maybe just the Dan Chaon theory. You heard it here first, but like why do you think that that confusion arises, right? Like the working class man is kind of he's contained, his life is circumscribed by these like yeah like five things, but there's kind of a paradoxical freedom where, like you said, he could write the haiku or he could have more enjoyment despite this more material entrapment,
Right.
whereas the upper middle class man has less material entrapment, significantly less, but so much psychological entrapment. And I'm so curious your theories on that. Like, please. I
Oh,
want
it's, I mean, it's all, I mean, I think most of it is capitalism, right? It's this idea that um, you have to have the most, and, it's beamed into you from like, um, kindergarten, right? It's like the hierarchies of who is best. And I mean, there's always somebody who's doing better.
yeah.
Um, and like I think competitiveness and jealousy are just really, really built into our culture especially male culture in a way that um is really hard to escape. Um, and um, I mean, I have close friends of both genders. Um, and um, I think there's always some problem with most of my male friendships. Um, unless there's like unless there's like a radical power imbalance, like I'm friends with like people that are much younger than me,
Yeah.
or that don't or that are involved in something that is completely different from what I'm involved in. So, I like being friends with other male writers is very hard.
I bet.
Um,
Oof, God, I bet.
um,
Oh. Wait, can I sorry, I want to interject. Is that okay?
yes, please do.
This is how I so people who know me know I've kind of taken my leave of Judith Butler's theory. Sorry, Judy. Um that like gender can't just be a speech act. Like because I mean, I can't just simply say, "Hey Dan, I'm a man.
Right,
Let's do it." It like in some senses, sure, I can perform masculinity, but I can't have the subjecthood that goes with having been socialized as a man, yada yada. You know what I mean? For years, or having
right, right,
we've had the testosterone conversation. Like it's there's so much that goes into being of one gender or another, both material and social. And Dan, this is how I knew is because like obviously I've struggled with feelings, in my 20s, really with feelings of, oh, I'm competitive. I feel envious of writers my age. Um, but even like I was still working through later on, but I'd really kind of shed that. And I realized it was so much easier for me to shed that because even beneath all the like makeup, the playing
right.
on TV, what really my sense of self-worth came down to was at the end of the day, Dan, it was don't gain weight. Still got to look good. You still got to be attractive. You still, I would, whatever books I'm publishing, right? My big breakthrough with this transition was I allowed myself to gain some fucking weight.
Hmm.
I was counting calories until the day I took my, the first injection. And so I think that's what's so interesting to me is like it's because I see it with trans feminine friends, right? Who sure are in occupying a different social sphere, having made this transition, but it's the baggage is hard to shed, and I
Right.
might be unsheddable, and so that's it's so this. Oh my God, your books are so vital, even just for this reason alone, because we have such a vastly limited understanding of what's going on for men, and also so few men are willing to say, like you have, and like JM Coates did in Disgrace, hey, this is hard and I'm experiencing shame around these stereotypes of masculinity in these ways.
Right.
Zero sum game, the competition, the jealousy, what I experienced as a woman, child's play to what came my way as a man. And so I'm so like, can you tell me, let's use one of your books as an example. Um let's use the Miles and Hayden Cheshire story.
Okay.
So Hayden, criminal genius figure, as it were, right?
Right.
And Miles, the
Alpha
kind of
twin. Alpha twin.
exactly, yep, alpha twin and more successful in whatever, you know what I mean? Miles, the beta. Can you tell me like how capitalism is intervening on men in the very fucked up ways that I think you accurately have identified through the Miles and Hayden Cheshire story?
Um, well, I mean, I think at the like, at the basic level, it's like, I mean, Hayden is um running a scam. I mean, I mean, it is at like at some level all about money and about gaining power over people. And also, I think we don't exactly talk about um the the desire. I want to say it's the desire or a longing for destructive power. I
Yeah.
mean, right? I mean, the you can raise a boy child without any access to like toy guns or soldiers or whatever, and they'll still do this. They'll still shoot you at the table
Yes, they
with
will.
their finger.
Right.
Like that does like that's a thing. And is it, I mean, I don't think it's nature, but it's like coming from the culture in this way that seeps in no matter what you do. And I feel like um that um capitalism and colonialism are about not just owning, but crushing,
Rushing.
right? It's about, like it wasn't just westward expansion, but it was like westward expansion with like torches
It's like
and a steamroller.
oh my God, it's like if I well what I said to you in that email, like the zero sum game sense, right? Of like, it's not just that I want this, it's
Right,
that you having this means I will not have it. Or even if you and I both have something, I've got a problem with you having something.
right. Because if, I mean, if you have, if we're, it brings you too close to being my equal.
Yeah, okay, yeah. And there needs to be an alpha. There needs to be
Right,
why
right.
what is up with that?
I don't I don't have any idea. It's like one of my least favorite things. And it destroys friendships.
Right.
Um, and it also is destructive of um male intimacy. It's completely destructive of that because you can't share things that would make you feel like vulnerable. right? You can't be completely vulnerable to somebody, or it's hard to. And I feel like that's like um uh that's built into the political system and into the like sort of the virus of it. Because if intimacy were possible, if like um this feeling of um not be like not being in danger of getting your back stabbed was possible, then the whole capitalist system would begin to collapse, right?
Yes.
Because it's based on that. It's based on feeling competitive, being lonely, being like not having um, trust in other people. I mean, it's that's the thing that makes it run.
Yes.
Putting the rotten mango in there, even though it's probably not even of benefit to you.
Man, if we take one quote from this, one pull quote, it's capitalism is putting the rotten mango in the bag, even when it's not a benefit. That's the thing too, right? The harakiri I was talking about. It's like, well, if I'm committing suicide, if I'm going to commit ritual suicide, if I'm going to go to the icy depths of hell, then you're coming with me, friend. Like,
Right.
it's so intense. And I'm wondering, so this actually ties into another aspect of shattered masculinity that you explore brilliantly in all of your books, particularly with Aaron Tillman in Ill Will, the failure to launch. The
Hmm.
and so the Aaron Rabbit dyad are an absolutely, it's deeply compelling pair to me. Rabbit being the working class kid who really had this joie de vivre and loved to learn, and then suddenly got wise.
Right.
And it's all over for Rabbit now. He's decided, and so he's going to be vacuumed up into these cycles of substance abuse. And Aaron Tillman, I think I said this in my letter to you. I was like, even though I've had my own issues with substance dependency and abuse and stuff, as a teenager, I was like, who's snorting heroin? Who is snorting heroin? How is that happening? Like, that's so intense. Like, I'm like, whoa,
It was a
self-care.
thing though, wasn't it?
It was a thing.
It's
That's what I'm
it's not
saying.
it's sort of not any as much anymore, but like there was a period in where
But
my I was like Oberlin students, like and
yes,
that those are like good kids,
that's what I'm saying. Those are the good rich kids. It was 2000. It was the aughts. It was the 2010s.
Yep.
There were kids in my little suburban Chicago turning up dead, heroin overdose.
Yep.
And I'm like, it's like there's a Lynchian aspect too, well, not with the surrealism, but with the gritty underworld is exposing itself in the suburbs.
Right.
But there's also, I think, like such a fascinating, like I'm really more compelled by the Dan Chaon take on this of like, how is this intermixture of class and masculinity and disaffectedness, like how is that all like convening to create this phenomenon of these kids who like just get, like boys especially, who are just like bye, they could have anything
Right.
and they're like bye. Like, what is that
Well,
thing?
I mean, I think it's like um the narrative is still like the narrative of like um mid-century capitalism, like you know you have a skill, you hone that skill, and then you are rewarded by getting money for it. And that might be I'm good at school, or I'm good at sports, or I can play the guitar, or whatever. But I mean that just like doesn't exist that much anymore. There's no direct path, and it's confusing. And I think a lot of people without a direct path and without like a really strong inner um like drive of some kind, it's easier just to be like, I don't see any point in pursuing this stuff. I think I just like stay home and play video games and, eat Hot Pockets. Um, and
It,
I mean, it's a kind of like refusal to play the game, but it's also like not knowing what not having any other options. Either you try to play this game that's rigged and that isn't even like that available. Right? I mean, you don't like you get out of college, you don't have like a direct path to like um I'll start working in advertising or whatever. You don't have
yeah,
that path doesn't exist.
right.
I think about like at Northwestern, there's the Medill School of Journalism.
Uh-huh.
A lot of my friends were like going to school for journalism. I
Uh-huh.
like, why would somebody do that now? Like, like, are there jobs in like every small town? No.
No.
I mean, the Cleveland Plain Dealer barely exists. It's on a skeleton staff. And that used to be like a huge employer.
Right.
So I mean, I'm just thinking about like if I were 21 and trying to decide what I wanted to do, it's not like there's a clear path. I mean, maybe like doctor lawyer is still a pretty clear path, but lawyer not. I mean, what are you going to do when you get out? Doctor, you can get a job.
It's like I'm even thinking back to like what people are missing is like it's like not even the mid 20th, it's like the 19th century. It's like apprenticeship. I want
Right.
to be a shoemaker. You know what I mean? Like I want to be a haberdasher, whatever. Like I want to
Well, and also, I mean, like it used to be in that period, it was always like, you were going to probably go into the family
family
business,
business. Yeah.
right? I mean, you were just going to do what your dad did.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
I guess I'm thinking, yeah, more like 18, because then you
and
have
I think that was like what our, like what a lot of our early American dream story was about was like, I'm not going to be a blacksmith. I'm going to go to the city and become a writer,
right.
you
Wow.
know? Right. And that was the romantic dream is like the country boy packs up, goes to the big city and makes his fortune or whatever. Um,
And oof.
I mean, Gatsby's that.
And Gatsby's a grifter.
Right.
Oof, I have so many things to say, and I'm gonna narrow it down. We could talk another time about all the things I want to say in response to that because that was extremely helpful. I was actually just thinking about as you were speaking the Japanese hikikomori phenomenon
Hmm.
of the young men who spend like decades just in their rooms playing video games
Right. Right.
as this kind of like yes, like refuse Nick sort of attitude, but also like I'm not going to engage with a rigged system, but also like it calls to mind the kind of turning away from the world, that I the like the Buddhist monks like Kenko and Chome of the
Right.
culture
Right.
we're choosing. They of course weren't playing Grand Theft Auto, but they were engaged in I think like antagonisms. I guess I was reading about some of these guys and their lives weren't all just like meditation and peace, right? It was the same sense of like the world has proven itself unfair. I'm gonna leave.
Right. Right.
Um, so that's the one thing. The other thing is, oh man, there's so much to say here. The other thing is like, okay, so we're gonna enter the grifting part of the conversation now. Are you
Hmm.
ready for it?
Yes, I am.
So
You've been lying to me the whole time.
this whole interview's been a grift. uh, I'm not really a man. That's true. I'm not really a man. So anyway, the there's the phrase fake it till you make it, right?
Hmm.
And I think um kind of in line with what you're saying here, right? That phrase, which like guides a lot of like the startup culture of like move fast, break things,
Right.
like we're just gonna like tell the VCs that we have what we have. We don't have it, we'll have it for 6 months, but the product has to sell.
Right.
that culture, I feel like, comes from the same sense of, go west, young man, and make your fortune, be the most
Right.
brilliant one, be the best genius, that whole idea. But now it's kind of morphed into fake it that you're making it. Just pretend that you're making it. You're not
Right.
making it, but pretend, fake
Right.
it. And
Right.
and I'm wondering, Dan, if we could like get into how the grift, or how the dropout, right? How the, the rage quit. Like, well, this isn't working for me societally, so I'm just going to be a criminal. I'm just going to do something really malignant and violent. How
Right.
does that how does that like come about? How did you get your interest in writing about that? Because that is so many of your characters.
Yeah,
How many
it is.
dudes who do these things in your books?
Right. Um, well, I mean, I think at a basic level, it gives you plot. I mean, when people, it's interesting when people do bad things. Um, but I mean, I do think that there's like an admiration for that, and um, it's in contrast to um, you know, do what you're supposed to do, and you get used and discarded and ignored, right? So if you, but to break out of that requires some kind of um, transformation, but also some kind of trickery that um, means being who you, like, my one of my big touchstone books is Talented Mr. Ripley, um, right? Where it's about like um transformation at any cost. And it's um I don't think um that's an unusual desire amongst young men or old men or I mean think I was talking to my friend Ahmad last night about how the admiration for Trump is not that people are blinded. It's like the same admiration a lot of people had for Tony Soprano and Walter White, right? They didn't get that they were anti-heroes. They were guys that were getting what they wanted by any means necessary. Kick ass, right?
Cowboys. Cowboys.
Right. And I feel like um that's one kind of escape hatch, right? I mean, it's sort of the opposite escape hatch from um, I refuse to engage with this world because it's not fair.
Right.
It's like I'll engage with this world, and again, it goes back to also that desire to destroy. I mean, I think, right? I mean, I think that kind of faking
That's
is also um, it is destructive, right?
hugely.
And um it's interesting to me that it's like um so much of the tech bro business model is about stealing. It's all, I mean, we don't even have to talk about AI, but I mean it's so much about stealing and about tricking people. And
Go back to the first mechanical Turk in
yeah,
the 13th century. It was a fucking guy hiding, pretending to be a machine playing chess.
right, right.
It, yeah.
And it's like um people that play by the rules are suckers. That's the, I mean, I think that's where this thing splits into two, right? I mean, it's like people that play by the rules are suckers, so I'm opting out. People who play by the rules are suckers, so I'm gonna screw over as many people as I possibly can for the joy of it.
Which is to add, not an actual joy.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like I don't
Right.
know. Like, but yeah, I guess like
Oh,
yeah,
I don't know.
that's inspiring.
I think that uh sadism is much more common as like a way of being in the world than we'd like to admit.
Yeah. I think psychopathologies and these whatever you call them cluster B kind of personalities. It's yeah, it's a well, it's to go back to the twin thing though. My time I spent with, it's hard to tell whether my best bro was a sociopath or a psychopath, but my time I spent with an individual who was like, I feel so nice when I
Hmm.
suffer in big ways. I feel
Hmm.
ooh, I feel giddy. That it was the twinning thing. I'll talk to you about my novel about this because it has echoes of your stuff too, and I'm like, oh my god, especially after this conversation. But that twinning thing was happening, right?
Right.
In we're talking like a Macaulay Culkin, Elijah Wood, good son kind of way of
Right.
like,
Right. Well, I mean,
son,
and,
but you
and
and
you,
you
I
get
mean,
joy and I get joy, but in the exact opposite way. Sorry.
right. I no, I mean, I was just thinking about like, um, I mean, this is like when you are at school, you're a little kid and you have like the thing where um you talk somebody into doing something and then they're the one that gets in trouble and you get kind of like just a real warm feeling in your chest as you hear them crying and saying, I didn't mean it. And you're like, ah, this is the real reward that I will look for forevermore. The sweet tears. I think there's like there's a whole like little speech that uh Akil gives to Dustin, where Dustin's like, why would somebody do this? And he's like, what do you mean? Why would they do
Yeah.
it?
Well, Akil is in many ways the Virgil to Dustin's Dante.
Right.
But it's also a Socratic process because Dustin knows a lot of this stuff already.
Right.
Dustin knows what he's getting himself into, and which actually I'm so curious. Maybe we can segue into the sort of like class Midwestern conversation,
Hmm.
or get more intensely into the class-based Midwest specifically, because we've talked about class more broadly, but I don't know, ill will is really like it's an opus, like it is like it's the card you slide across the table. It's like, who's Dan Chaon? Ill will. Like, I don't know, it's
Right.
such a they're all such amazing books, but ill will, I feel like you are sharing a very specific set of themes with us that was like preoccupying you in a very personal way. It's a very
Hmm.
personal configuration of your themes. Um, you don't have to explicate that why and how. What I'm curious about, Dan, is how the satanic panic of the 1980s, right? So
Hmm.
if folks remember, obviously you, of course, will, but folks who are watching remember the Damien Eccles trial and
Right. Which is like kind of a big part of this book in a weird way.
part. Yeah. What is that? What was it commonly known as, Dan? I forgot. Like the something for, like, what were they called? That group of kids, the Damien
Um,
Eccles group.
oh, I goths? Were they goths?
They're goths, but it was like the trial was like the like. I'm gonna Google it because I
Yeah, I
can't
can't.
remember.
I mean, I
But
don't. Yeah.
I'll figure it out. But like basically, yeah, there was this phenomenon in like the late 80s and early 90s. This it was like
It was
talked
going,
about.
I mean, it was going on even like starting in the early 80s. I remember
Yeah,
like there were like I had a Dungeons and Dragons club after school, and it
yeah,
got shut down because there were complaints from like church people that it was satanic.
Panic. Yep.
Mhm.
Uh,
Uh,
oh, West Memphis 3. West
West
Memphis.
Memphis 3, right? Yeah.
Um, so Dan, can you, okay, I feel like the whole like rural America Satanists, these goth weird kids are Satanists and they're drinking the blood of infants and they're doing these murders and pedophilia and like
Right.
drug angel dust, like all this stuff. It's this, I mean, the way you use the trend we're speaking about in ill will, it's nothing short of like total, like it's brilliant, it's genius, because the conversation around Satanism in like unites time and class and place. It's so brilliantly, like you've got rural working class kids,
Right.
boys, in middle of nowhere America. Rusty Tillman fits right in. And so I'm wondering how, like, if you could talk about like the real life kind of inspiration for like the sort of like Satanism that, like, quote unquote, that Rusty is engaging with. And also just like how that's a like such a, I mean, sorry if it's kind of a leading question, but like, do you think it's a vector for all these themes? And like, do you think it gives us a sense of place too? Because like these three kids, the West Memphis Three, were put on trial for the rape and murder of some young boy,
A little, yeah,
young
little boy.
girl, little one boy. Yeah, and it was these like 16, 17 year
I
old
mean,
kids.
there were more than one kid.
I don't, let me go back
I
because I
think
can't
it,
remember the number.
I think it was two or three
Three
kids.
8 year old boys, three 8 year
Yeah.
old boys. They, yes, they were convicted. No physical evidence connected. Damian Eccles is the guy who was in solitary
Right.
confinement and who experienced eyesight deterioration. Anyway, I'll stop talking because I really want to hear your thoughts on this.
Well, I mean, I do think um that it kind of goes back to that concept of freedom and gender confinement.
Mhm.
And I think like one of the things that was scary about like boys dressing in black and like putting lipstick on or whatever was that it was like a break from male gender norms, and
Mm.
that thus had to be like squashed, and it was like squashed with all its might. I mean, all of those, like just the little possibility of like a slight variation was enough to scare people to death,
And
right?
was it across? Did you find it was concentrated heavily? People were criticizing working class kids doing this more.
Oh,
Was it
for sure.
across
I mean, I think I
class?
think you had much more freedom if you lived in a city because you could find
Okay,
other people like you. And I probably, and there was a scene, right? You could, I
right.
mean, if you lived in Chicago during that time period, you could find the goth scene. You could like go to Medusa's juice bar and hang out with, Ministry or whatever. Um, and if you were in a small town, you were like one of two.
Yup.
And you were taking this big risk, and you were also like putting a giant bullseye on your back. Um, and I think that a lot of um, American panics, such as some of the ones that we're going through right now, are about reinforcing and putting particularly anybody that's working class back in line. Um, I think, you know, like any of the sort of um ideas about gender that are not totally conforming are so scary to people in small towns, even though, like, you know, it's not like um there are tons of kids in, small town Iowa that are using they them pronouns, but the very idea of it is terrifying
Sure.
because it offers an, like, it offers an out. It offers a way out of that box.
And then speaking from personal experience, like I I couldn't stand it. I couldn't stand not being taken seriously, being talked over, being in a room with a bunch of boys and I'm, being smarter than all of them and them still
Right.
talking down to me and sexualizing me. It offers an out. It is an out, Dan. It's an easy escape button, right? And like I'm not debating the sort of the whatever the rigor or theory or metaphysics of of asserting
Right.
non-binary identity, but for me, there was it I transness seemed so well considered. It seemed the obvious solution until I realized that it is it's was out of the frying pan and into the fire in another sense. I mean, it's kind of what helped me, like why I so appreciate your characters either becoming new people, deciding like George Orson. George
Right.
Love that name. George Orson being like, okay, now we're Brooke and David Fremden,
Right.
or now I'm, um you could have a fake ID, right? It could be that, or you could find yourself through whatever set of circumstances thrust into a new world where you effectively are a new person. Whether you're Dan Chaon going from this like really brutal working class Nebraska situation to being in this like academic upper middle class situation, right?
Right. Right.
Whether you're Damian Eccles going from like being this like West Memphis goth rural kid to like suddenly now you're in like Supermax prison. Like
Right.
it's so identity is ever shifting. And I think it's God, it's so true what you're saying. Attempts to police identity, broad scale attempts are manifold.
Yeah, I mean, I do think, like, I mean, youth revolt is not a new thing.
No.
Um, but I mean, I think um the attempt to shut things down that push up against like accepted concepts,
Mm-hmm.
like like pushing against everybody's got to work. Everybody's got to work hard. Everybody's got to make as much money as they can. Um, why?
I know. Why? I ask that all the time. Why? I agree.
um, or like, boys behave this way. Um, boys don't dye their hair black. Um, like, why?
I have one of my good friends was like, because he was like young, kind of in the punk scene like in the Bowie Prince glam rock era, glam rock becoming punk. So like seven,
Right, right, right,
and it was such a well because he was in like Cambridge, so he had more freedom. And he was a professor's kid, but he was like so it was such a joy to him because he felt the same thing. Like, my God, I want to wear like fun clothes that are colorful. And I'm a straight man. That's the case. But I also want to wear fun, cool clothes and I want to wear, whatever. Look, why can't I wear a dress? I'm a straight man and that's fine. And I don't
right,
care. It doesn't mean anything. Like if I wear a dress, I don't know. I'm not panicked now. Like I'm not trying to panic people either. And I feel like Prince and Bowie open
Yep.
floodgates for folks. But of course, then there was a material backlash where it was like this sort of like potential arises, and then you got to clamp down on it. And
Right.
potential, and you just see that like culturally.
Right. Right. I mean, at the same time, it's like it does get pushed back, but there's a little bit of but there's a little bit of forward movement.
Yeah,
It doesn't get rolled back completely,
right.
you know. Now people can play all the Dungeons and Dragons they want, and nobody will stop them.
What was yeah, can I well, I want to make sure we give you time to read from Sleepwalk because it's so good. And but I wanna can you tell me a little bit more about like tell me about like being part of the Dungeons and Dragons group or like being in like the clannish hyper patriarchal Nebraskan environment. How did you feel different? How would you have liked to have been seen? And maybe we could talk like this could be sort of like a proviso to like men out there who are feeling crushed by masculinity, right? What are some different ways? What are some communities that you were part of or wanted to be part of that would have made your life more easy to
Well, I do think like when I moved to Chicago, the goth and music community were useful.
yeah,
And um uh I don't know, just um being around people that liked books was nice.
yeah.
Um and um oh my dog needs to go outside. She's crying out. Can we pause for a minute?
Yeah, pause. Yeah, that's totally
All
fine.
right.
Pause.
All
Let's
right. You can edit this, I'm assuming.
yes, I'll totally edit it.
Come on, you can go. Mad because I had to close.
No worries. Where I did a like an in the moment edit.
Oh, okay.
Don't have Final Cut. I should get it, I guess. No, what I need to get is Final Draft.
Oh yeah, you do. That's
Well,
that's the standard.
that's the standard. I gotta buy it with money that
Hmm.
I don't know, Dan. Maybe we'll just skim.
You can take it off on your taxes.
Yeah, that'd be playing by the rules though. Greenleaf. Anyway, well, yeah, I will take it off my taxes because I actually do. I'm a law-abiding citizen. Anyway, the last yeah, so that's I think my last question to you for this interview. Like, really, maybe you'll downplay it because I'm sure you will, but like you are like one of the most like the smartest, most consummate chroniclers of what what is going on with masculinity, the root of the crisis and like that we're in right now, right? The crisis of masculinity that's like that has generated JD Vance, that has
Hmm.
generated Donald Trump, that has generated capitalism and immiseration and foreign wars, right? And so what do you think, like this is an ongoing conversation, you don't need to give me that listicle, but like what are like what would are some things that men need, that men could benefit from, because you describe with each like in each of these books, and I'll hold them up again, like this book is about a guy who you'd think is living the bachelor's lifestyle, but he is so lonely and detached from reality that when a woman who might be his daughter calls him on his phone from a burner, he goes down a rabbit hole to try to find her.
Right.
You've got some serious like failure to launch, drop out of society, I'm going to scam my way to the top in here. You've got that in here as well as very intense like violence and intimations to violence and suppressed sexuality stuff. What do you think, like, say I've read these books, right? Okay, now I know what the problem is. What would be some possible ways forward?
Well, I mean, I just think that if there were less policing, I mean, that's just, um, if there were more acceptance of variation
Mhm.
in all kinds of things,
Yep.
right? I mean, um, like even something like being bi is policed by both
So intense.
gay people and straight people. It's
Yep.
like that is
Yep.
too, whoa, that's too many too many legitimate people you can have sex with. No way, stop. Um like um
Men just like don't get to be bi.
what?
Men just aren't allowed to be bi, it feels like. Men, it's just like, no, a bi man? Nope.
Right, right.
So,
Right, because it's because that like that was a label I was using for a while. I don't really use it anymore because it's just too problematic. Um because like it's like, oh sure you are.
how do you, yeah,
Like
that's
there's some aspect of like, oh, you just don't understand your own uh desires or
right.
whatever, or you're just but I feel like there's a lot of that stuff with that is with masculinity. I mean, and with and with rigid femininity too, which you know um is its own problem. But since we're talking about masculinity, I feel like just any kind of open door of variance is going to be helpful.
Yeah.
Like just letting people know it's okay to have like some like movement outside of like outside of the box.
Hmm.
Um, and I think that's happened to some extent. I
Hmm.
mean, it's still, I mean, I think it's maybe um, it's more possible for like somebody who's not in a small town.
Hmm.
Um, I mean, I feel like that, the policing is just so insane at like in places where there's a smaller community and there's no place to find people who are like you and all of that stuff.
Right.
Um, but I mean, I do think that um there's, like there's been movement since I was a kid in terms of what's acceptable,
Hmm.
right? And not a lot, but there's some movement. Um, I mean, I think like um people probably in back where I grew up probably know that it's not okay to use like certain kinds of slurs. Maybe they know that now. They might do it not in public.
Forward.
So yeah, I mean it's a very tiny step, but I'm guessing that that's probably the case.
Yeah.
Um, I don't think I'd be comfortable with anything but a cis straight sexuality in that town.
Hmm.
But you could probably survive.
Hmm.
I mean, you wouldn't get your house burned down, I'm guessing.
Right.
Whereas maybe you would have. If you like, 20 like 40 years ago, you maybe would have.
Yeah. It's man, it's so one, I guess one thing I'll add too, right, is I think like, so you talk about relationships between like professional, not professional, but like friendships between like fellow like writers. I mean, male writers.
Hmm.
It's almost foreclosed upon if the dude's like your same age and there's any sense of equality, right? Um, there that sort of like I need to get mine attitude comes out.
Hmm.
Um, I have observed that also with relationships between writers of different genders, with the equality, the sense of equality is encroaching. There's like rage coming from the man that the woman has caught up with him, caught up,
Hmm.
or surpassed him. And I feel like the sense of that's where like the entitlement and the misogyny and all that, the really kind of ugly stuff starts to come out in really rough ways.
Hmm.
I feel like it would benefit men so much to like not just give up the ghost with this like I need to get mine zero sum thing, but really be okay with, like, the whole idea of like, well, I'm not like, a girl can't be better than me at this, like I run faster than a girl, like that, like flash forward 30 years and the dude's saying, well, the girl can't be funny in Vanity Fair, the girl can't win a National Book Award, like it's like, oh my god,
Right.
and so that needs to, the sense of shame that men have about like anything feminine, right?
Hmm.
Because you're so heavily policed. Don't wear lipstick. Don't have this. Don't do this.
Right.
Eschew the feminine, and then when the feminine presents itself, like as like a female friend or like someone in your sphere, it's like no, attack. If there's any sense of encroachment, right? It's a lot of things coming together at once, and so I
Right.
mean, that kind of, that's something that needs, that like, if that could be let go of, I think it would just be a world of joy for,
Right. Well, I mean, I
you
think
know.
for that to be let go of, you'd have to find um like an alternate to the like identities that you're being offered as a man. The like, and so much of your identity is like based around this concept of work and success and
Yeah,
right. I mean, and
yeah,
the happiest men that I can think of are people who have like kind of not are not like after that. They like have
yep,
hobbies, right? They have hobbies, they
yes,
have things that they love to do. Um, and those things are not like centered around being top dog.
that's actually why Will in Sleepwalk is kind of appealing, because he's an avowed not a top dog. Like he's like, I'm just driving around in my camper. I love my
Right.
dog who has
Right.
PTSD. I love to microdose with LSD, and like he's kind of the Big Lebowski figure, the lovable dude,
Right.
not cutthroat. Like,
Right.
yeah. I want to hear from his something from his voice, but before we do, Dan, this is kind of a special request, but as long as we're talking about like supporting, equality between genders, and also more broadly like the work of women, I would love to hear, there's a really really beautiful tribute to your late wife in the acknowledgments of Await Your Reply,
Right.
and I got the chance to look her work up, and I'm just so interested in what she was writing about, and she was writing about gender as well, and like in it seems like in her case the kind of like the constrictions of being a woman in a more conservative Jewish family.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And I'm curious if you could just speak a little to, her name was Sheila Schwartz. If you could speak a little bit to Sheila's like creative preoccupations and interests, and what, if someone wanted to read Sheila's books and start reading what she wrote and her stories, where you would recommend to start.
Okay. Well, um she has a short story collection called Imagine a Great White Light. Came
Mhm.
out in 1990. It was one of the first Pushcart Prize award books. And then she worked for a really long time on a novel called Lies Will Take You Somewhere. And that came out shortly after she died in 2008. Um, so, I mean, one thing I think, to me, the thing that's attractive about her work is this um, I mean, they're realistic stories, but there's always a sense of the like of the uncanny or the magical in the world of her stories.
Mm,
And I mean, she was influenced by people like Ozick and Singer, and like people where the the worlds of their stories is kind of infused with like the supernatural. Um and at the same time, she's kind of writing about these very contemporary uh topics, and like the kind of like realist story that used to be super um popular, like kind of auto fictiony story, but with this veneer of the mystical and the strange to it.
mm,
Um, and that was the thing, I one of the things I really loved about it. And that she, I think, sometimes had a hard time publishing her work because she didn't follow really traditional narrative models.
mhm,
They like the stories move sideways, and they like um do these weird flips, and that's something that I really loved and really learned from.
yeah.
Um and uh so yeah, I would say get that story collection, Imagine a Great White Light. It's amazing.
Interesting. Cool. Imaginary
Um
White Light, and then what's the novel called?
the novel is called Lies Will Take You Somewhere. um and it's about a woman who runs away to Florida, runs away from her rabbi husband, and like gets in all kinds of terrible, like surreal adventures in Florida.
That's
Where you got to have surreal adventures if you're going to Florida.
exactly. You know, it almost sounds, Dan, like Sheila was kind of ahead of her time, because I was thinking like stories that go sideways, man, just wait until, like post like 1990, between 1995 and 2005, and the sort of rise of like that kind of it's almost like a feminist magical realism, because
Hmm.
Amy Bender getting pretty big in that time, and oh man, Ruth Ozeki, like like folks,
Right,
yeah,
right,
started to publish
right.
more about like the experience of being a woman as understood through this sort of magical, like realist metaphor. So really
Right.
cool. I'm
Kelly
so glad.
Link.
Yeah, sorry.
Kelly Link.
Kelly, thank you. She's the big one. Yeah, Kelly Link, absolutely. And all the way up through back to Carmen, right? But Carmen kind of continues in that. Carmen Maria Machado continues in that legacy, and
Right, absolutely.
millennials are doing this really cool work too. So, cool. I will link to those books in the post. And now, Dan, since I promised I'd check in with you and I didn't, and I'm so sorry, let's wrap this up because I want to make sure you can go on with your day. You are going to read to us from Sleepwalk.
Yes. I'm just going to read a short chapter that's like sort of towards the beginning.
Okay.
Uh, and it kind of gives you a flavor of what Will is like. Um, Slightly empty, slightly lost, slightly delighted, holding it in my chest like a sustained chord, driving 90 miles an hour. We leave I-70 and merge onto US 287 South. They say that tornadoes roam across this stretch all the time, but we don't see any. In Campo, Colorado, we stop for a moment to pee and buy meat sticks and gas, and then we stand in the gravel parking lot of the truck stop staring out. The town of Campo looks to be no more than 100 souls, and God knows what they do with themselves here. It's that gray yellow sod all the way to the horizon, barbed wire fences and transmission towers, kind of like the way Amnesia might feel if it were a country. I unwrap a meat stick and take a bite, then give a piece to Flip, my dog, who mouths it thoughtfully from my fingers. You have to wonder about these settlers of the Great Plains, these white people who in olden times killed the natives and laid claim to this dirt and stuck to it. who stranded their children and grandchildren with a birthright of dust, a collection of clapboard shacks with backyards full of unmowed pigweed and junked cars and abandoned swing sets and withered, thirsty trees. Was the genocide worth it? I think this and then I check myself. It isn't a fair way to think. The customer service at the Campo truck stop is excellent. There's a polite, round faced teenage girl behind the counter who smiles sweetly at my compliment. A tired looking bald manager with a set of worries on his shoulders hunches over his laptop. Who am I to look down on them after all, even if they are the offspring of murderers? No doubt, in the great scheme of things, we are all of us the offspring of murderers, right? If we weren't, we probably wouldn't be here.
And I love that. Oh, thank you, Dan. I also love when folks read from their books on like on the interviews because I'm just like, oh, it's like a reading of one. It's amazing. But yeah, I was looking at a description of Sleepwalking. Will is described as a big-hearted mercenary.
Right.
It's just like that alone should make anyone want to buy the book. It's narrated by a big-hearted, a warm mercenary. Like
Right.
it's amazing. Well, thank you for that, and thank you for such a fantastic interview, Dan. I hope that I hope that I know that if enough people like listen to this, maybe they'd find a way to be able to help this crisis of poison men, because you have a lot of amazing stuff to say, just in general, but also about like an issue that's really plaguing our country profoundly,
Mm-hmm.
multiple levels.
Yep.
Um, so thank you for coming on I guess this is a show. Is it
Yeah.
it's a show.
Quite.
We'll call
It's a
it a
show.
show. We're putting on a show. Thank you, Dan. And once again, Dan Chaon, these are the amazing books that I read. There are so many more to read, and there's one that is being copy edited. Does that book, man, well, obviously it has a title. Is there any like pre-pub anything news about that book
um
you would be willing to share?
uh Yeah, I mean, I guess the log line is like there's it's set in 1915 and it's about a pair of orphaned twins um who are on the run from their murderous uncle and take refuge in a traveling carnival um among the like a sort of a traveling freak show
Mhm.
um which we're not using but
Which they were then, so
right, but they were then.
seems like
Um,
yeah.
but and so it's sort of like a combination of the movie Freaks and the movie Night of the Hunter. Um,
Man,
with like sort of like Bradbury and True Grit thrown in there, Geek Love a little bit.
I was gonna say Geek Love. Oh my God. Wow. Well, if my wife just heard you say Geek Love from the other room, then she's going to be like, "What are you talking about?" She loves that book.
Oh, good.
She loves Sleepwalk too, but she's a Dan Chaon reader now for sure. So she's especially gonna want to read this book too.
Yeah, I'm excited. I mean, I'm excited. Uh, I feel like I mean, it does sort of once again go over the usual themes, but it's in a different vein, in a different genre, and it's historical. So that was fun to do.
Yeah. Oh man, we didn't even get to talk about the genre pivoting. Oh, I'm sorry, Dan.
Well, we talked
Talk
about a
about
lot of
genre.
stuff.
We did cover a lot of stuff. Well, if maybe you'll come back on, or maybe one day you'll write a guest post when it's worth it for you.
Right.
Oh man, I would love to. It would just be so cool to like get more of your thoughts at the very least on how now genre and writing about these sets of themes through different variations in style and place and time can help us understand them better. But that will
Yeah.
have to be for another day.
All right. All right. Well, it was very good talking to you, Ruff.
Yes, very good talking to you too, Dan, and thank you for coming on. And I hope that I paused this in such a way that the video is
It'll
safe.
all work out. Yeah. All right. Talk
All
to you
right.
later.
Bye,
Bye.
Dan.